coming up.
Prime's better than Select, and they might think Select is better than Prime. We've seen that time and time again. But what people have known is whenever they go and buy a product that says Angus on it, it means quality.
100% agree with you. I think we have done a good job branding quality.
Efficiency is yield. Pounds are still king. And now we're going to have them into a harvest facility. Pounds are king too.
Okay.
That's right around the corner on the Live Ag Ranch and Livestock Marketing We Live It podcast. But first, a reminder. If it's time to sell your cattle, consign your cattle with Live Ag. Our summer auction schedule is on your screen and available at live-ag.com. Consign your cattle now and take advantage of Live Ag's generations of experience in livestock marketing. Now here's your hosts, Ty D. Cordova and Casey Mabry.
Welcome to the Live Ag We Live It podcast. From an exciting standpoint, we got rid of Ty this week, and we brought in a couple of guests. We got Dennis Metzger and Jared Wareham in here this week, and we're going to talk about some different things that are going on in the industry. And Jared has brought in some different information here, about some stuff. So, Jared, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself and kind of tell us who you are and where you've been, and kind of some things that we're going to talk about today.
You bet. So I appreciate you having me on. And obviously, I've known Dennis for a lot of years now, and we've both of us have worked in the beef industry and the marketing and livestock supply chain space for quite a while. And so I thought it'd be a good day to come in here and visit with that, watch the live ag sale. That looked like it went really well. So congratulations, you guys, on that. Would love to talk about some of the updates to like the USDA live animal spec, things that are happening with like the yield task force and what that may mean to the industry and how that may impact cattle that trade this summer, which I know is an important thing because you're starting to book summer sales schedules right now with as far as cattle and get them under contract, and what that may look like as we go through the next 6 to 18 months as like places like Sustainable come online and start killing cattle, and what that may mean for as we migrate through the change, bottoming out maybe of supplies. Is this the smallest calf crop? Is next year's calf crop the smallest calf crop? And things like that.
Yeah, who knows? I guess you could probably shake your magic 8-ball and maybe figure out something there, but it'd probably still come up with some different information. Before we got on here, Jared and I were talking. I think the biggest thing that you wanted to talk about here was the live animal spec in that way. So traditionally speaking, just to kind of educate people on that, cattle go into the cooler, or cattle come into a packing plant. They get designated as either Angus or non-Angus. Those cattle are then marked on some type of a way in that plant and designated as the ability to go into the branded box beef program. The largest branded box beef program out there would be the first one. That would be the G1 sort, which is certified Angus beef. And then a lot of programs get pulled out of that. So since that was incepted, or the inception of that was probably 1978, there's been a lot of different programs that have come off of that. So now we probably got, that was the G1, that was the first box beef program. Now we probably got 175 of them. And as everybody knows out there, this industry changes a drastic amount. And there's lots of different characters of cattle out there from a phenotypical standpoint and a genotypical standpoint, to where we've got, cattle that are just as high quality, another breed like a red Angus or something like that. So, Jared, talk about what we talked about earlier.
Yeah, you bet. So I think you did a great job teeing that up. So thank you for going through that, because that isn't something that's really common knowledge unless you've worked in the space that you've worked in, right? There's a lot of nuances to, how G stamps work and what happens inside that packing plant and how those carcasses get sorted and designated for different box beef programs, et cetera. But the recent update to the USDA live animal spec, specifically, which now includes red Angus cattle as an Angus, because we know just genetically, right, there's black Angus cattle and then there's red Angus cattle, but it's really the same breed. All started with the same, origins, et cetera. And then just, because some breeders wanted reds and blacks, it kind of went bifurcated from there long time ago. And you're right. I mean, CAB was really the pioneer that put us on the map to identifying an Angus branded program and based on quality. So it was something that needed to happen because we created raving fans of premium quality beef by doing that. Yep. And created a lot of trust in our product, not only domestically but globally. We've both done some stuff globally, and we know that there is a American beef has a other countries know what it is, and so I think that we have to give homage to them for what they've created in the trough that was cut by CAB and that G1 stamp. But today, I think the exciting thing about what's happened and what the team at Red Angus really pushed for is the expansion of the inclusion of Red Angus cattle in Angus programs, but as well not just Red Angus cattle, but Red Angus and additional Black Angus influenced cattle like Black Angus Charolais Cross and Red Angus Charolais Cross. So now those cattle can flow into an Angus branded program and fall under a G schedule. If somebody wants to create their own G schedule to adopt that new live animal spec, they can. And some packers are starting to do that.
Yeah, which is probably allows, I mean, from a grander scope, let's say I'm a Red Angus breeder out there and I've just been Red Angus on top of each other. And then you want to bring in, you talked about the yield component, those are going to push a lot of quality attributes. And then maybe the antagonistic part of it would be taking the muscling out of the cattle, or and there will probably be people debate that with me, or taking some of the average daily gain. So like what you're discussing is possibly having the ability now to take a Red Angus bull, breed that to some Charolais cows, or take a Charolais. Could you take Charolais, or has it got to all be Red Angus sired?
Well, I think it really depends on how they want to build a G-Scamp to fit that live animal spec update. And I would honestly encourage listeners, if they have questions that we can't answer today, to reach out to the Red Angus or the Charolais Association teams. Absolutely. To really get some of that detail on what they have to do.
Yeah, because it could get pretty confusing if you don't necessarily know.
Can.
We probably can't even go that deep into here anyway and get it clear up.
We know at least one of the newest G-Stamps is G161, so there's 160 some of those G-Stamps for Angus, and they're all different, right? Yeah. And so to be able to talk about each one of them today would take forever, and so I think the best thing to do is to talk to those breed associations to learn more.
Looking to earn a premium for doing things right? At Earth Claims, we provide private, third-party verification services trusted by ranchers and preferred by retailers. We offer the original animal welfare program, Global Animal Partnership, also known as GAP. And now we've added NHTC and Verified Natural to provide the best third-party bundle in the business today. Plus, Earth Claims offers grass-fed and organic programs to propel your access into the top markets and best prices. Our team has over 200 years of combined experience in animal husbandry, and we understand the ins and outs of your operation because we've lived it too. Call us today at 816-652-2004 or visit earthclaims.com to enroll your cattle and start earning more. Earth Claims, rancher trusted, retailer preferred.
So what is G161?
That is a G-Stamp created by Sustainable Beef. That's the new packing plant in North Platte that's just started killing cattle. And I think they wanted to be open-minded and not just go down that traditional path of, hey, if it's black-hided, it's an Angus, right? They didn't want it to be, they didn't want to exclude themselves from a population or additional populations of very high-quality cattle. They knew that, the Black Angus Charolais Cross, the Red Angus cattle, the Red Angus Charolais Cross, and then other crosses, because right, if it's a Black Angus cross with Simmental, it's just going to look black. And so I think we're not excluding those from this conversation. We're just assuming everybody knows that they're already kind of in that conversation. But we are now including the Char crosses with both those Angus types into a box that goes to a consumer as an Angus product, not a hide color base, but just an Angus product. It is, let's say it's, if they're targeting X amount of supply of upper 2/3, upper 1/3 prime, and some select, they can now do that through that mechanism to put that product in that box.
So let's say I send a set of cattle into there, and Dennis, you sold a set of cattle. They're 80% black-hided from a phenotypical standpoint, and then 20% of the cattle are other colors, right? So in the traditional way, we send those cattle in. Everything that's black-hided gets marked with an A or some type of a designation. Previous to this, the rest of the cattle would just fall into a commodity sort. Today, describe which animals now can get that same designation as the black-hided cattle.
Yeah, and of course they'd have to use a different stamp, right? They can't use the G1A. They would have to use, I think, a different type of stamp there in the plant. But so I think, to answer your question, it would be, let's say you have a mixed pen of both black and red-hided cattle, and they're all Angus, whether it's source and age or verified to be Angus sired, they can all flow into that same program and under whatever stamp that would be, and however the packing plant wants to handle it as far as those carcasses are coming down the chain. And I think that's another big important part to mention is, let's say you have, because we know how it works. The straight loads of cattle are great, but we know there's tons of blended lots and sorted lots. And so let's say you have 6 or 7 pins that include black-hided, red-hided, buckskins and silvers, Black Angus, Charolais Cross, and all of them fall within the specs of that live animal update. They could all go into that box, and it could all go down the same chain. It just happens to need to fall under the guidance and however that particular harvest plant wants to manage those carcasses as they come down the chain.
Yeah, and that harvest plant gets to make the decision because it would be their in-house brand.
Yes.
That it's Angus. And then of the Angus, those cattle that fit that criteria deemed by what the USDA live animal spec changes are.
Correct.
So, no, I think that's a little bit clearer than what I was thinking a little bit ago, and it makes a heck of a lot of sense because, I know that we've got, that word Angus means equality to a lot of people.
Mm-hmm.
You sit down and you start asking the consumer, name me the grades of beef. They may not know that Prime's better than Select, and they might think Select is better than Prime. We've seen that time and time again. But what people have known is whenever they go and buy a product that says Angus on it, it means quality to them. And so whether you're eating an Angus hot dog or you're eating an Angus ribeye, it means something to those people. So now this just allows, as the numbers have gotten tighter, to include those red Angus type cattle.
Absolutely, and I 100% agree with you. I think we have done a good job branding quality globally, and CAB's to thank for that, right? But what we do know, and this is just from water cooler talk with friends that are chefs and in that space, as well as butchers and other studies, it's Angus is the word that's key to that. It's not a hide color. It's not Black Angus or Red Angus. It's just Angus. And so, again, I think because supplies are tight and because we have to look at our industry from a sustainability standpoint, the least sustainable thing we can do is say, hey, we're going to ignore logic and science, and we're just going to say if it's black hided, it can only be Angus.
Right.
That's not very sustainable, and I think we can't have those conversations. It's great. We need to talk about other things like the climate smart and methane. I know that's always going to dominate headlines because it's a big topic, but to me, yes, that's great, but there are simpler things we can do to make our industry more sustainable from an economic standpoint, especially for ranchers. Cattlemen and cattlewomen that are involved in production side or cattle feeding, et cetera, is allow them to put what is an Angus or an Angus influence product, regardless of hide color, into a box. We can't keep stepping over a dollar to pick up a dime when that's something that's simple to fix.
Absolutely. So Dennis, as you look forward here, and you're starting to go out there and talk to your guys that are booking sales and kind of setting up cattle and things like that, or even the other ones, how do you think this is going to impact to your operators?
Well, to a lot of my longtime friends and customers that, my start was with the Charolais. And so when I first started in the marketing business, I was primarily a Charolais influenced go-to guy to market that product. But this is and kudos to Mr. Tom Brink. He kind of pushed this thing through and has been working on it for several years. So I think I'd certainly like to reach out to him and give him a major portion of the credit because he brought it on and stood behind it and drove it through. Cattle quality has changed a lot in my short career, and we can give a lot of credit to the Angus side of it for that. But from an economical standpoint, from a customer standpoint, I think it's a huge step forward because there's a lot of territories that have to have a crossbreeding program in order to stay viable. And I think that we've been driven or psychologically we've been kind of schooled that it had to be a one breed rotation in order to be able to sell the product at a premium, and which is true to a certain degree. But I think now that we've got other options, it's going to open the door. And I've seen a lot of my customers that went to a one breed rotation just because that's what supposedly the industry wanted and stood for, and that handful of cattle that we've seen in them niche markets, and I won't mention those names, but that's a small portion of the whole 29 million cows that we have, but that's the one that got the most recognition because we sell them in a competitive bidding system, and those premiums, they remember that 250,000 head of cattle a year that was getting the big premiums through a video environment. So from my standpoint, it's got great hope and knowing that we can we've got another outlet for that product. I think time was going to help that anyway, but this is going to enhance it and bring it back to a quicker switch. Where most of the entities I work with have always been a 2-breed rotation. We'll see a black or red-hided cow base and a Charolais bull side of it. And it's not those. Charolais and Red Angus are the two that's going to probably fit the best, but there's a couple other continental breeds that could have benefit from it too. So
yeah, no, I think that's what, if you look at other species and different things like that, I mean, especially on the hog side, they've been able to take lots of different attributes from different breeds and composite them. I mean, what's interesting, Dennis and Jared, like when I sit back and I think about, I would have started in this industry in 2005, and the industry was probably grading somewhere around 60% choice and higher. From a black-hided standpoint, the industry was probably about 65 to 70% black-hided. And like you said, the market signal that came out, not only just from CAB, but then as we piggybacked on those, I'm not going to necessarily, I'll say copycat programs that copied that, it forced the packer to bid more on black-hided cattle, give premiums for those cattle, and then you would give premiums back into the country because they're like, hey, look, if I'm going to get a premium from the packer, they need to be black-hided when I purchase those. And so the market signal's been there. And so then the interesting thing that I think about from an efficiency standpoint, so let's just say you take single breed rotation and you're taking all the quality attributes for those cattle. What you've done is you've advanced the grade. Now I said we were 65% choice and higher, maybe 60 as an industry, and today we're like 85. Mm-hmm. And so,
consistent.
We used to be 2% prime. Now we're 12 to 15% prime consistently. And so we've definitely done that. Now the spread between cost of gain and cattle price has helped that because we've made cattle bigger and fatter and all that stuff. But man, what we probably need to focus on a little bit as an industry is that yield grading component. Because again, quality and yield are antagonistic with each other. The industry, us having, corn in the bunk at, 450, 475, it covers a lot of sins up. Now I think we need to work on, probably some of the terminal characteristics, the average daily gain, feed conversion, because if we start to narrow up, we've kind of started to narrow up the spreads. Prime spread's not as big as what it was. Choice spread's not as big as what it was. But if we start to narrow up now the spread between cost of gain and cattle price, those efficiencies matter. Wow. And so if you wanted, so let's just talk about that for a minute. So then if you allow guys to bring in cattle that are buckskins or silvers or whatever terminology you use there on the different colored cattle, it probably allows them to probably dig from a bigger pool of bulls.
So efficiency is yield. Pounds are still king. And now we're going to have them into a harvest facility. Pounds are king too.
Agree.
Yield is a big part of their bottom line. So and it's also a big part of the cow-calf operation and the stocker operation. So it's one area, one efficiency area that can benefit all segments of the industry in my mind. And I'm not saying there isn't one bull rotation programs that have, they've done Angus have done a great job. Black Angus have done a great job of having higher performing genetics too. But we've changed the industry to where quality grade is not really a big issue as far as it's pretty easy to make one grade.
Oh, I mean, the variation in cattle. I mean, I think back to when I was buying fat cattle, even like in 2010 to 12, that time period. I mean, I remember buying a set of cattle that graded 4% choice, and I thought I was going to get fired. And now, I mean, honestly, that same type of animal is going to grade a heck of a lot higher than that. So the variability has changed a lot. Yep. But you know what? We're 50% yield grade 4s and 5s right now, probably. So I mean, we've made these cattle just super fat. And Jared, we talked a little bit ago. There's a task force on that, right? Mm-hmm. So understanding yield grade, understanding how that is, because man, we're so quality driven. 15 years ago, again, we weren't necessarily quality driven. Now we're now we're trying to make a choice product and then have the cutability attributes of that make it a lot better too. So
moving livestock isn't just about getting animals from point A to point B. It's about doing it with the care and precision that keeps your investment safe and sound. Since 1987, Agar Transportation has been the name that ranchers across the country trust with their herds. Their experienced drivers understand that your livestock is your livelihood, and they trust each load like it's their own. I've personally used Agar to move my own livestock, and I can tell you, nobody takes better care of your animals on the road. Whether you're moving herd bulls or a full truckload of calves, give Agar Transportation a call today. That's 208-452-5011, or visit agartransportation.com for a quick quote. Agar Transportation, moving your cattle with care since 1987.
What do you know about this the task force on the yield rate component?
I think the easiest way to compartmentalize that is to say there is a group of individuals from academia and from the industry that have been challenged to add the clarity to the yield equation that we've really been missing for the last several decades. So again, to your guys' point, I mean, we've really done a great job genetically, and then now recently with genomically enhanced EPDs, improving quality grade to a level that you're right. I mean, it's not hard to get really good cattle to define good cattle even from tons of blended pen out of Florida, right? You could pull a bunch of Floridas together, put them on grass in Kansas, and then finish them in somewhere in Kansas at a feed yard and still have pretty good results. Whereas 20, 30 years ago, that was a total different story. So, and again, on the feed efficiency piece, we went down that road pretty hard, and we're still working very hard on that one. So we've covered those two buckets, and the last one, to your point, is the yield grade. And so I think the desire from the industry is to figure out the clarity that needs to come. And you're right. I mean, when you're bumping, I mean, I've seen plant averages, especially in April, March, April, May. I mean, they'll bump 35, 45% yield grade 4s and 5s. And we just don't, I think, as an industry, truly know how to quantify the losses that come from the reduced amount of yield that exists. And so until we get clarity on that, we don't know how to economically figure some of those things out. And so I think we see the premiums that come from a set of cattle that'll be 95% choice or better and 40% primes, and we ooh and ah about it, and which is great. We need to focus on that still, but we can't understand yet what is lost from the yield equation. We focus, in my opinion, too much on dressing percentage and not enough on what the actual yield equation should look like. So that's what the task force is being challenged with, and we hope we add clarity to that part of the industry, and that will then flow back down to individuals that are using breeds heavily like Charolais and that rotational cross, to Dennis's point, because to be sustainable, we need a maternal component, we need a terminal component, and we put them together just like every other protein's done. So if we can figure out those yield pieces, then it adds that much more value and power to breeds like Charolais. That, and for the years I spent running hard in the feed yard space, working for Tom there at Top Dollar, I'd want to talk about, Red Angus and Black Angus influenced feeder cattle, and all they wanted to talk about was Charolais, Black Angus, and Charolais Red Angus influenced. I mean, there's not a feed yard in this country that wouldn't take a good set of those, because they just clip a coupon and make money. So. Yeah.
So if you think about the incentive, and I always make the statement, incentive drives outcome, and the incentive today is to make cattle big. Right?
Yep.
We got to get pounds on them. The byproduct of making cattle big is like, what are you producing? Like when we crack the hide off of the cattle and we hang them up, and then we crack the hide off of the cattle, and then we look at that deal. So if we were to lay them out and go, what's the muscle, bone, and fat? You'd lay it out on 3 deals and say from a percentage standpoint. I used to debate this like when I worked at Cargill, and we would say, all right, look, the cost of gain today is $1.10, right? I'm going to sell them for $2.40 in the north, right? So every day that I add that to them, I'm making $1.30 a pound, right? So it's going to tell you to feed them to infinity. But in hindsight, when you step back and you crack those cattle open and then you break them into that muscle, bone, and fat, what are you producing in those incremental final stages, right? Mm-hmm. At the beginning, it's probably 70% muscle. I'm just throwing numbers out there. I have no idea, but it's a lot of percentage of muscle. It's going to be muscle beef that makes the composition of the carcass right. But I think in those very, very tail ends, you're producing kidney, pelvic, and heart fat, and you're producing external fat that's going to get trimmed off. And then you trim that off. The muscle beef today, the carcass is worth $360. The cutout value is $360. But then you break the components of that cutout out. If it's pure fat, that pure fat's probably worth, from a yielded standpoint, we got tallow that's real high, and you got the FTB way to do it. But let's just say the fat is worth, if the muscle's worth $3.50 a pound, the fat's worth 50 cents a pound. Okay, so we're adding, we're putting on a pound of gain. That pound of gain costs $1.10. It's worth when you buy it from them at 250, but what's the packer turning around and selling it for, right? The packer's paying 360 hang in for it, and then they turn around, they're going to sell that fat, that incremental fat that they paid 360 for 50 cents a pound, right? And so that's the part that I think if the easiest thing to do is say, I added a pound of weight and it's worth 260 or 240. The hardest thing to do is go, what is that? And the cattle are the only thing out there that truly go that direction, and it's the hardest thing to quantify.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Because you can't kill the same cattle twice. Mm-mm. You don't know if it was really fat. Well, what you got to do is go, when we add this incremental deal, and so to your point, when you talk about the yield component of it, the yield grading component, the task force component of it, the incentive is to still overfeed cattle, even if they're 50% yield grade force.
But hopefully now you know what's in that 240, right?
Yeah, and I think that, if you go back 100 years ago or 50 years ago, when all the fragmentation was done and we had all these little mom and pop shops, the guy that's buying cattle and selling meat sat at a desk next to each other, and they went out in the packing plant. And the guy that there was that pain point of the guy at the plant going, hey, these things are too fat. And then the sales guy pushing back going, I can't do this. And then the procurement guy going, okay, I'll give that market signal back. But now our system's gotten so large that the procurement team is sitting in a corporate office somewhere very far away from the packing plant. The operations guys at the plant going, hey, these things are fat, but whatever. And then you got the sales guy selling some other product. So it's not that you don't have that, you know what I'm saying, that conversation going, what I'm paying for doesn't make sense.
Go ahead. I got a question, but I'll go. Yeah.
So, from my perspective and how this new grid or possibility at sustainable fits me, I work mostly with cow-calf guys. I also feed some cattle too, so I understand both sides of it, or think I understand both sides of it. But what's relevant to me is mostly the cow-calf guy, where I need to keep him and her viable in the industry, sustainable, if you will. And, probably one of the sharpest cowmen that I've ever had the pleasure of being around, and I've been around a lot of them, he always told me, you take a product and make it fit your environment, and it'll take care of you in the next environment. And that was very true. I mean, he was running a pink-nosed purebred Charolais that he retained ownership in, getting them to grade 80-some% as calf feds. So I think all this has to have some common sense to it in every segment. A lot of times we're not able to control what happens after it leaves the cow-calf side of it, so we build the best product we can that's got the most marketability. But I would also include in there that we got to throw some common sense in with it, and that Char red or black Angus cross has a bigger window to manage. I mean, you can manage if you're fighting the market or in today's case, you're just making them big, because that's the only way these cattle are working for them on the other end, because you got to make them big, and the industry's calling for us to make them big now, because tight supplies. We're not that far behind in total pounds from previous years, but we're just making them bigger. So you put yourself in a position. Yield, we could anticipate it was coming a couple years ago. Those people that are still doing a 2 or 3 breed rotation with their Charolais and building their own replacements, they're in the driver's seat now. They're selling pounds. They're selling a product that you can manage different. And I think management is a factor that we don't measure scientifically, but management is a big part of the final outcome too. I can take a set of about anything breed-wise, and if I manage them right, I'm going to put them at least in a pretty high percentage quality grade. If I'm managing them even better, well, I'm going to make them yield. So I think from a cow-calf side, from the start of the production line, I think this is putting them in a position to really be in the driver's seat, both from their perspective and then for every segment of the industry.
Yeah, you bet. So, Jared, what were you going to say a second ago?
Yeah, you just listen to you talk. I kind of had just some questions pop up in my head. The there's several hamsters up there. When the wheels get to go, and they're all kind of in different directions. Yeah.
As long as they all go the same way.
No, they don't, and they aren't the same speed either. So it can be kind of confusing at times. But I wonder, in our as we have strived as an industry to, chase trust of the consumer by putting a product in front of them that they really wanted. Because at the end of the day, we're in the food business, right? Whether we're, we love breeding cattle and we're passionate about it because that's what we love to do, but we're still in the food business. And so we've built trust because we focused on, the product and the endpoint. And so to listen to you talk through that scenario, I wonder what, so we haven't had a lot of motivation to solve the yield issue till now. It's coming. But is it because it's been so easy and there's such a huge demand for grind in this country that because of the trimmings and because that fat can go out and we can blend it, and so the fact that they can bring in cow meat, et cetera, blended to make that grind, and we eat like how many hamburgers a day in this country? I mean, is that something that's maybe covered this up a little bit? I don't know. It just popped in my head that how many pounds of grind go through?
If you go to other countries, they don't feed cattle as hard as we do. Obviously, they don't have the grain base that we do, and they don't produce the fat that we do. So it ends up making us, bring it in. And people like fat. I mean, my favorite cut. We're sitting there at Cooper's Barbecue, and they offered brisket on the deal for free, and I went and bought a short rib because it's 50% fat, and that's how I'm a fat dude, right? So anyway, that's what people like, and so to that point, absolutely. But I think that we're truly subsidizing that hamburger, if you really think about it, with import meat that's cheaper than what we're having to pay here.
And that's what I was getting at. Is the 50 cents is the discount that they're paying for that fat after they're trimming that carcass out, but because they bring in that import meat,
it raises the value.
It raises overall value, and because we have so much demand for grind and hamburgers, it kind of washes. I don't know.
Yeah, well, no, what's funny, I mean, you talk about the blend between the hamburgers, is like if you go to any food service restaurant, your hamburger patties are like a 73. Mm-hmm. And then what's everybody want when they go home? They go buy an 85 because they feel fat if they're pulling up there and getting the 73s or something like that. We cook out the water on the leaner stuff, and we cook out the fat on the fatter stuff. But no, absolutely to your point. I mean, the consumer in the U.S. likes that. The consumer in the U.S. is there. But I mean, from a dollars and cents standpoint, I think we've gotten too far past the deal. We've been in this situation before. Back in 15 and 16, we had the same economic signal out there.
Exactly.
Now, the market prices were a little bit different, but we had super cheap corn. We had really high cattle. We overfed cattle. It allowed us to do that during this time period. And then what will happen, though, in my mind, is you'll get to a point at where we have more equilibrium as far as the demand and the supply of cattle. Today, it's way out there, right? We got too many shackles, not enough cattle. That'll right itself. I mean, the packer margin is very, very tough. And then so the ones that start to really understand the cuttability attributes, and really it's not the cuttability attributes, it's what am I paying for this stuff? And this is the only industry really, as I think through it, that doesn't know when they're buying that animal, it's all a prediction on what the value is going to be. I mean, you go into any other industry, the lumber industry and things like that, they buy wood there, they buy these logs, they know and they can analyze it. We don't know. We single trade cattle, or double trade. We go yield, quality grade. And then we start to measure, fat thickness and ribeye area, compared it to a standard to get that yield grade component. But man, I'll just tell you this. Anytime that I've ever been at a packing plant, I sit there and I just look at carcasses and I try to understand it, and I cut my teeth in meat judging and trying to understand what's the value of it. And then I've boned cattle myself, and it had not in any recent time, but I've boned cattle myself, and then you go and lay it out there, like I said, a pile of muscle, a pile of bone, and a pile of fat. The muscle's worth a lot of money. Today, we're not discounting cattle that much. Because, to Dennis's point earlier, he was talking about yield is the driver and pounds are the driver. Pounds are definitely the driver. You could sell cattle today at a discount because you overfed them, and it still makes more sense to overfeed them. Because the economics.
There's no incentive to not do it.
The rollback's there, right? And so the beneficiary of that, in my opinion, Dennis, is the rancher today. Because the feed yard has done, he said, all right, look, this is what I can pay for the cattle. I can pay more because the markets, the component of the cost of gain is so small from a feed cost standpoint that they're putting it back into the feeder cattle. So I think as we move forward here, the people that need to understand it is like, all right, how do I make the animal more efficient? Because from a competing protein standpoint, I think those other proteins have done a good
Oh,
job.
yeah.
I'm not gonna say a better job, but they've done a good. We've definitely been on the quality attribute of it from a beef standpoint, because honestly, there's not very many of us that'll sit down and enjoy pork chop. We like the sausage, but it's
I like the
30%
bacon.
fat.
Dude, I like
it's
the
all
bacon.
fat. Right?
Give me some pork belly,
Yeah.
buddy. So,
But it's a longer process for us to make a change.
Yeah.
I mean, we're 2.5 times probably longer.
I think it's longer than that because you have generational mindset.
But
right.
well, even gestation wise, I'm saying though, you know, you're right, generational.
Yeah, I'm not going to put a limousine on my cows because my grandpa did it and it didn't work, or hey, I'm going to put all limousines on there, or whatever. You know, I'm not trying to pick on breeds, but it's hard. I think in the other industries, the life cycle of them is so short, and the environment's controlled in the pork and the poultry industry, right?
Yep.
Ours is so different. You can't if you're in the southeast, it's going to be hard for you to run Angus cows, and if you're in the northwest, it's going to be hard for you to run anything with kind of humps or anything thin hided. So I think it's all geographical driven, but. No, I think those conversations have been awesome, and you guys, I appreciate you being on here for sure. I know Ty definitely missed out this episode getting off here, but
Who?
Ty,
Do we know?
Ty.
It might be one of the
do I know?
Might be the
Do I know
best
Ty?
one, right? Yeah, Ty's right over here. We just didn't have 4 chairs, and he was the one
He
that
takes up more
Yeah,
room.
we booted him out of this deal. But I appreciate you guys getting on here this week, and I mean, do you have any other closing comments you want to say?
Man, I don't think so. I enjoyed this. Thanks for having me. Enjoyed the sale. I always enjoy catching up with Dennis and the crew here, because there's a lot of years we spent kind of in the same space, right? So, no, I think I appreciate your opportunity to come hang out with you guys and talk about this stuff, because we're all passionate about the industry, and so just talking about it's a lot of fun for me, and I do think it's important to educate the industry, and I not only on the things like the yield task force, which we hope is going to bring about some needed change, but also with this new USDA live animal spec update, it impacts a lot of ranchers, a lot of men, a lot of women, all up and down the supply chain, and it could be something that helps as we go through this tight supply in the next 2 or 3 years, and we have some new packing plants come online. It might be the one thing that saves them, instead of competing only for those black-hided cattle that they used to have to force into that box. Now they have a bigger pool of cattle to maybe scale out and make their business a little more robust from that standpoint, and get through the next few years, because we do need diversity in the packing space, right? So I think we need to be conscientious of ways that we can, as an industry, help them survive.
Yeah, you bet. No, I think all those things are very, very important. And I mean, like always, we're trying to get some information out there to you guys and really stimulate thought and conversation. So if y'all ever have any questions or something, just reach out to us, whether it's on Facebook or any kind of social media platform. We can get you connected with Jared or Dennis or myself or Ty on any of these things. If you guys have any topics you want to hear about, dang sure let us know. We can do that, or have any interest on getting on here. We're trying to get like a diverse audience to get onto this deal. And just like I said, we want to make sure that it's more educational than anything else, and you kind of learn something from it. So appreciate everybody listening. Thanks for getting on the Live Ag We Live It podcast. Again, Casey Mabry here. Usually I got Ty. This time I got Dennis, and that's a lot better for this one. But like and subscribe here on the social media, because that's the first time that I've ever said that. But again, if you guys have any questions whatsoever, let us know. Have a great one.